Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to today's Wonder Why Lunch and Learn. We have the fabulous Dr. Talia Marcheggiani with us today, and we are going to be talking about cholesterol, all right? But before I introduce Dr. Talia formally, let me just tell you who I am and what you're doing here and why Dr. Talia is coming to talk to us. So my name is Tracy Sider, and I am a movement coach specializing in pain relief and body shape change for women over 40, particularly women over 40 who are stuck behind screens and are sick of their stiff, achy bodies. They're done with their stiff, achy bodies, and they are ready to get in shape, feel pain-free, and age well without the sweat, strain, or time suck of traditional exercise, because that really sucks. And there is another simpler, smarter way that I tell you all about in my Reshape Method program, which Dr. Talia has done. But Dr. Talia, thank you so much for coming to join us today. Cholesterol is a big subject and it's a big taboo, and there are so many different opinions about that. So welcome.
Thank you, Tracy.
Introduce yourself and tell everyone what you're going to be talking about today. Yeah, so Talia and I called this podcast in the background, Eat the Damn Eggs.
Eat the damn eggs. Yeah, so we'll give away the punchline, but that's, yeah. So if you have to run, now you know. Yeah. Yeah, this is good. So let this be a lesson to everyone. If you need help being motivated, get someone to just tell you to show up at a certain time and do a thing. That's Tracy's motivated me to get this podcast going, because this has been a subject that's come up a lot in my practice. Let me get the screen share going. And I wanted to do a podcast on it, but other priorities were taking hold. So I think Tracy might have seen my Facebook rant or my Instagram rant on cholesterol, and
I did,
and invited me to come and talk about this wonderful brain molecule that has a bad reputation.
Yeah, so we've called this podcast, we've called it, and this Lunch and Learn, how cholesterol, when done right, can be your friend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, we have many different names.
Yes.
Yes. When done right can be your friend. Eat the damn eggs. And brain fuel. So it was a combo between them all. I have.
Yeah.
So everyone,
I think cholesterol has really gotten a bad rap over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And is that bad rap warranted?
Yeah, exactly. So some questions we're going to talk about are, what is cholesterol? What is its role in the body? What happens when your doctor says you have high cholesterol? What other things should you take into consideration? What happens if you're told you need to take a cholesterol medication, and what foods, should you be eating? Should you be worrying about cholesterol in your food, and other topics? And we'll open up to Q&A at the end, because I think, so think of your questions and type them in the chat for Tracy to organize.
If you're watching on LinkedIn or in my Facebook group, Moving and Reshaping Club, which recently changed name, I am watching the comments in the chat. So if you have any questions that are relevant to what Talia is talking about, I will hopefully just be able to interrupt you, or we'll leave them all till the end. And if you're watching on the replay, just type #replay and tag me or Talia, and Talia will get back to you.
Yes, perfect. Yeah, I think try and leave them to the end, but I kind of like tangents. So we might, if one feels really relevant about the slide, feel free to jump it in. But I think we might cover it down the line. So hold them to the end. If you type them in the chat, then you won't have to continue to remember them. All right. So everyone, I'm Dr. Talia Marcheggiani. I'm a naturopath in Toronto, and my practice is all online. So I can see everyone in Ontario virtually through my online platform. And I met Tracy, we were collabing. I did her Reshape Method, and it's been very wonderful, very educational. I still do it. Just a quick anecdote is I was getting psoas pain, and how I know it was psoas pain is because we learned all about the psoas and the Reshape Method and its attachments and what it feels like and its purpose. And And I think, it's one of the stabilizing muscles. So I think I may have pulled it just from like trying to balance myself on the ice. I didn't fall, so the psoas did its job, but I was feeling this soreness. So I started busting out my reshape method, releases, strengthening exercises. And it's been a lot better. So let this be the second lesson of the day, which is, like taking charge of aches and pains and understanding, from a functional perspective, understanding what the role of those muscles are and having these tools you can implement right away to get on the right track without, having it lead to more hip pain and compensation and tightness in other areas and things like that.
Fantastic. I love that. Thanks for sharing that, because I think it's really important for people to know that when you join the reshape method, you get lifetime access, because it is for the rest of your life. It's not an exercise program. And to just be empowered, to have the tools and the knowledge and the understanding to that movement is medicine, and to just heal yourself instead of thinking, oh, I have to go to someone and get this treated. Right. So that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a combo of both, right? So, but one is passive. You show up and you get cracked, but the other is like understanding, what to do about the muscle and what it is that's causing the pain and where it came from and how to fix it so it doesn't lead to something else. So yeah, very valuable, lifetime of value. There's my sales pitch for you, Tracy. All right. So Brain Fuel, the truth about cholesterol, or why cholesterol is your friend, or eat the damn eggs. I'm Talia. I'm a naturopath. And the reason that I started posting about this topic is because I'm doing a lot of blood work with people. And throughout the end of 2022, beginning of 2023, I'm seeing a lot of low cholesterol.
Low.
Let that sink in. And some people are on medication and some people are not. And some people have certain things in their cholesterol panel that are high and that are getting flagged by their doctor. So let's understand what's going on with cholesterol, what it is, and why you should care if it's low as well. So what is cholesterol? Cholesterol is a molecule. It's a waxy substance that basically moves fat around the body. So it looks like, I don't know, if you want the biochemistry lesson, it's a bunch of carbon rings stuck together, and it's neither fat nor water. So know that like oil and water don't mix. And so it's kind of more of a waxy thing. And it forms our cell membrane. So it shuffles around the body to repair our cells. It forms the backbone of our hormones. It regulates things in our brain and our nervous system. So nervous system has a lot of waxy, fatty components to it. It's used as an antioxidant. And why do we hate it? Because it is implicated in a disease process called atherosclerosis. So in this picture here on the right, there's a picture, like a cartoon of atherosclerosis. It's a tongue twister word, which is the formation of plaques in the arteries. So the blood vessels, the big vessels of our body that moves blood. And atherosclerosis becomes a problem because it impedes blood flow. So if you think of like a clogged drain in your house, if the drain starts to clog or get some things blocking it, you get less flow through the drain, through the pipes. So you have less blood flow in the body. This is going to cause circulation issues. It'll cause issues getting nutrients to the body, nutrients to the brain. And the end result of atherosclerosis, the big problem, is the risk of heart attack or stroke, in which the blood vessels of the heart or the brain are occluded, and the heart or brain can no longer get blood. And the end result of that we're trying to avoid with heart disease prevention is death. So it's important to think of cholesterol like that, right? We don't care when we're thinking, when your doctor's concerned about high cholesterol, they're concerned about cholesterol's implications in atherosclerosis, how that might lead to a cardiovascular event like heart attack or stroke, and ultimately how that might lead to death, right? Because we know that heart disease is the #1 cause of death in Canada. So it's a big deal.
And I think if we can add there as well that heart disease, many people don't know this, heart disease is the leading cause of death for women over 50.
Yeah.
It's not breast cancer, it's heart disease.
Yeah. Yeah. Heart disease and cancer is number 2,
Mhm.
I believe. Yeah. So this is the problem, right? So we want to prevent atherosclerosis, which is a plaque that's formed of immune cells. It's formed of, there's cholesterol at the site of the plaque. So the plaque consists of LDL cholesterol. And then eventually it starts to lead to a block. There's a lot of inflammation at that area. It's important to know how that process begins. So there's a lot of theories. Nobody knows 100% for certain. But the first thing that sets the process off is damage to the blood vessel wall. Then you get cholesterol going to the area, and then you get immune cells, and everything starts to clump and coagulate and starts to form a clot. So we're going to talk about, is cholesterol the only risk factor for death from heart disease? Okay, that's because we don't care. Like, your doctor might be looking at your cholesterol panel to see, is your cholesterol coming down? But what we care about is the end marker, right? Not the blood marker of cholesterol. We care, are we getting heart disease prevention? Are we reducing your risk of having a cardiovascular event? All right. So cholesterol does lots of good things in the body, but is implicated, has been accused of causing atherosclerosis.
Amazing. Okay, if you're watching on Facebook, give us a thumbs up or a heart in the comments to let us know that you are with us.
Yes.
Very interesting, right?
So there's a bunch of different things. When you get your blood work done, you check your cholesterol. Cholesterol has a bunch of different things going on. There's total cholesterol. Okay, that tells you what is the grand total of all the cholesterol in your blood that we can detect. Okay, and that is usually the main thing that we talk about when we talk about cholesterol. So usually your doctor's looking at that number to see, is it under a certain level? And that number depends on other risk factors. We'll talk about that in a second. And you're going to learn how that number is, I believe, and the research, like the prestigious journal Nature, in a recent study, shows that number that we're trying to chase is probably way too low for optimal health, let alone cardiovascular disease prevention. So you have your total cholesterol, then you have triglycerides, HDL, LDL, and something important to consider is the cholesterol to HDL ratio. Okay. So triglycerides are just kind of like fat in the blood, like waxy fat in the triglycerides form the fat molecule. And so we test them as part of a cholesterol panel. They are related, so they're important because they're related to the condition of fatty liver disease. So fatty liver is when you are developing visceral and abdominal fat. So everyone talks about the belly. The belly fat's not such a big deal if you can grab it. I mean, we don't love it, but if you can grab your belly fat, you can grab your belly pudge. It's actually, that's subcutaneous fat. We don't love how it looks, but it's actually not harmful to your health. What is harmful to your health is visceral fat. So that's when you can feel that your abdomen has gotten larger and it almost feels hard. The reason it's hard is because there's more inflammation. Now, this is different from abdominal bloating. So if you can get it assessed, right? Because it's hard to tell sometimes. All we usually feel is like, oh, my stomach is bloated. So if you feel it, there's a lot of almost like a distended belly that's very hard. Sometimes fat in the face can reflect visceral fat. But when we have fat around the viscera and we have fat around the liver, it starts to affect how our metabolism works, and it starts to affect our health overall, increases inflammation. It affects our liver health, which we're going to learn is very important for our overall health and our metabolic health and managing cholesterol. So high triglycerides are associated with fatty liver. They're associated with insulin resistance and a condition called metabolic syndrome, which is a precursor syndrome to diabetes, where you have high cholesterol, you have high insulin, high blood sugar, a lot of abdominal fat, high blood pressure. So ideally, you want to keep triglycerides under 1.7. Even better, I would like to see them under 0.8. So the lower, the better. We usually test triglycerides in a fasted state. So it's a good idea to go fasted, even if your doctor doesn't tell you to. Avoid eating for about 8 hours. Go first thing in the morning before breakfast, drink lots of water. Don't drink coffee. So this is called the fasted state. And we see what triglyceride levels are when at baseline, because after consuming a meal that's higher in fat, you can get a temporary rise in triglycerides, just like you can get a temporary rise in glucose after eating a meal that has sugar in it or carbohydrates. All right, so we're looking at fasted triglyceride levels. We'd like to see under 0.8. The higher the triglycerides, typically the more insulin resistant someone is. And there's other ways to test insulin resistance, but this is a really cheap way to figure out if insulin resistance might be at play. All right, the next one is HDL cholesterol. What does HDL stand for? It stands for high density lipoprotein. Okay. So cholesterol is packed into these lipoproteins. This is you came for the whole lesson. So here it is. So these lipoproteins are, we have a picture of it in the other slide. It's like the round ball that's packed full of cholesterol and fat and triglycerides. So high density lipoprotein are typically, they're smaller, they have a lot more packed in. And HDL's job, if you want the science lesson, is to bring cholesterol from the arteries, from the organs to the liver where it can be processed. So how that benefits atherosclerosis is you're taking cholesterol from these plaques and you're moving them out of the plaques. It's cleaning everything up. HDL acts like an antioxidant in the body, has a lot of beneficial health effects, and it's negatively correlated with insulin resistance. So the higher your HDL is in blood, the better insulin sensitive you are. So the better your insulin is working. Okay. And so what we want is insulin sensitivity. What we don't want is insulin resistance. So the higher the HDL, the better. And yeah, it protects against heart disease. It's an antioxidant, and it's reflecting good glucose control, good metabolic health. And you want your HDL at least over 1.3. And these units are in millimoles per liter. In the States, we use different units. There's cholesterol conversion charts on the internet I had to use to get them into the units I know. So if you're from the States, these numbers might look weird. You have to do a conversion if you have different, like very strange numbers on your blood test. They're probably using different measurements. All right, so HDL we is sometimes called the good cholesterol. These are the simplified, simplistic terms to describe these different cholesterol lipoproteins, but this is like a colloquial way to remember them. HDL is high, it's good. LDL is sometimes termed the bad cholesterol. It stands for low density lipoprotein. Again, it's just a different type of package that contains cholesterol and that contains triglycerides. All right, so it's all cholesterol. It's just the packaging of it, right? So we're all humans. Some of us drive Mercedes, some of us drive Fiats, some of us bike. Okay. And so sometimes we hear LDL termed the bad cholesterol. This is what statins prevent the synthesis of. So typically what statins will reduce is LDL cholesterol. And statins they'll reduce the total cholesterol. Now, in Canada, so we will typically just test someone's LDL, I want to see LDL at about 3.3 millimoles a liter, and I don't want to see it much lower than that. So there is a problem when you start getting very low LDL, because LDL we need, just like we need all cholesterol for general health benefits. Now, LDL sometimes is high as a response to something, we're going to get into this a bit later, but something called endotoxin, lipopolysaccharide that's released by harmful bacteria in the gut. So lipopolysaccharide is associated with inflammation, with depression. It's a result of intestinal dysbiosis. If you have this state or this condition, your body will make LDL as a way to neutralize the endotoxin, the lipopolysaccharide. And so this is a classic example of, blaming the fireman for the fire. Like every time a house is on fire, there's this red truck that always shows up. I bet you it's involved, right? So we have to be really careful when we look at the situation. Like, why are you always here? It's like, well, because I'm the fireman. My job is to put the fire out, right? So we have to be careful with LDL. Are we trying to just suppress LDL? What if it's there to serve a purpose? And the similar idea in atherosclerosis, right? we find cholesterol in these arterial plaques that we don't want because they're harmful to our health, and they put us at risk of heart disease and stroke. But is the LDL the cause of these plaques? And therefore, if we lower LDL, is that going to solve our problem and prevent heart disease and stroke or not? Or is there another factor we need to be aware of? So there's actually a couple kinds of LDL. There's the regular LDL, and then there's very low density lipoprotein. Okay, so you got high density lipoprotein, good. Low density lipoprotein, fine, not really a problem. And then very low density lipoprotein, or VLDL. And the VLDL and LDL, they get grouped into the same category, okay, which is not really fair, but there is a way to, and VLDL is more associated with atherosclerosis. So somebody might have high LDL, but it's the light, fluffy, the less dense, the low density. So it's the less dense LDL. And that is not harmful. It's not implicated in causing atherosclerosis and heart disease. So how would you tell? In Canada, we don't routinely test this, but we can test the two markers ApoB and ApoA1. And so ApoA1 is connected to HDL cholesterol, and ApoB is the very low density lipoprotein that we don't want. So if someone has a high ApoB to ApoA1 ratio, they're more at risk for cardiovascular disease. It might be more beneficial to be concerned about high cholesterol. So the clinical path might be, you have high cholesterol, you have some other factors that we're concerned about. We're worried about your risk of heart disease, stroke. Let's do a further investigation. Let's test ApoB, ApoA1, and see if we need to be concerned about cholesterol or if we need to focus more heavily on these other factors. Now, these two tests together are about $70. So they're not, whereas the cholesterol panel is like $15, and that's something that your doctor routinely will test. So it's a little bit more costly. I don't tend to order it too much because in most cases, unless someone has extremely high LDL and extremely high cholesterol, we're focusing on these other things that are increasing their risk of heart disease. All right, I hope that makes sense. Now, the final marker, and more studies are showing that this might be more important for predicting your heart disease risk, is the cholesterol to HDL ratio. So ideally, this number should be under 3. And I have to say, it's quite rare for me to see somebody with that number under 3. So you can either get that number under 3 by lowering total cholesterol or raising HDL, right? So, and again, because HDL reflects metabolic health, only 12% of humans in North America are metabolically healthy, which means that their body responds properly to insulin, they regulate glucose optimally. So I'm seeing a lot of elevated cholesterol to HDL ratio. So meaning that somebody's HDL they don't have enough HDL to, out of the total cholesterol, not enough of that cholesterol is HDL. And this is just done with a calculation. You take your total cholesterol, you divide it by HDL. It's done for you in the labs. They give you the number.
Okay, that 12% is pretty shocking. But
I know.
That's for another conversation, right?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. And we're going to talk about that too. That comes up again in another slide. But the reason it often goes undetected because we don't tell people about metabolic dysfunction until it's gotten to the point of diabetes, essentially. Right. Okay. So people are not, it's either not measured, very often not measured, and people are often not alerted to it. You will be told that you have high cholesterol, but you'll be prescribed a statin, and then that'll be that. Now, many patients, if they tell their doctors that they want to commit to diet and exercise for 3 months, they're often given that leeway. So your doctor will support you. They just may not know how to coach you through that. They're like diet, exercise. So figure out what diet, what exercise, and have fun. Okay. So one thing I'd like to do with patients, especially if they're stressed out about their cholesterol, because when you go to a health professional that you trust and they say your cholesterol is too high and now you're at risk of heart disease, people freak out, right? They want to know, like, oh my God, like, okay, I need to go on medication, I need to do what you say. And sometimes that is not necessarily beneficial for their health. It's also like, as naturopathic doctors, we think there's sort of a therapeutic order to things, right? What we're trying to understand is, why is cholesterol, first of all, is cholesterol too high, or is does new research tell us that it's actually optimal? Second of all, if it is too high, why? Is your body trying to compensate for something that we should be treating, instead of just blaming the fireman for the fire?
Yeah.
And then third, what is your actual heart disease risk, right? Because heart disease doesn't occur just because you have high cholesterol. In fact, 50 to 75% of people that get heart attacks have normal cholesterol. So it's not like, okay, your cholesterol's high, your doctor said, now you need to be concerned, now you need to worry about having a heart attack. The problem, and this is the problem generally in conventional medicine, is we don't focus a lot on prevention, right? This might be considered a preventative measure. It is, in fact, being on a statin is supposed to be preventing heart disease, but we're not really, for many people, right? A heart attack is a very sudden, very shocking, very stressful event, of course. And for many people, it seems to kind of come out of nowhere. And I believe that the issue, like we were just saying, Tracy, is that a lot of us are metabolically unhealthy. We're not told that, and it's not tested for. And so we're walking around where we could be optimizing things. We might want to, we might be willing to, and the strategies are not necessarily like all encompassing, like you have to go on keto or do crazy fasting or become one of these gym rats.
Yeah.
It's more strategic, right? So if you're more focused, more strategic, you're working with someone who's testing and monitoring certain factors that are relevant, you can shift your health. It's about patterns and movement over time, and you can shift those patterns away from this path to metabolic dysfunction. And then you have more control and autonomy, and you're more empowered around your health and prevention. So this is my philosophy. But there is something called the Framingham Heart Disease Calculator, and it's something you can just Google, and you can pull up your own numbers and put your own numbers into this, and it'll tell you your 10-year heart disease risk based on what they factor in. Okay, so these are models that were generated. There's more to it than this, like inflammation levels, insulin resistance, waist circumference, whether you exercise, et cetera, et cetera. But this gives you a little bit of an idea of, what your chance of having a cardiovascular event in the next 10 years might be, just based on these numbers. And so you can see that they don't care at all about LDL cholesterol. All they care about is total cholesterol and HDL. And so I just put in my age, and then I put in my details. I haven't tested my cholesterol in a while, but so I just put 5, like an average number, and 1.3 for just on the cusp of good HDL. And my blood pressure is lower than this. I just put 120, just like on the cusp of normal blood pressure. So kind of just normal cholesterol, normal HDL, normal blood pressure. And then so age will be a big factor in reducing your risk. You can play with these numbers and see what optimizes your health more. Checking off female instead of male reduces your risk by a lot, which you'll be happy to hear. I mean, it is the number one, health condition that women will, experience, but you have a less of a chance of having a heart attack if you're a female, because estrogen has protective effects. If you're a smoker, that raises your chances of cardiovascular disease risk by a lot. I don't have the active calculator in front of us because we could play with these numbers just to get a sense, but you see the number go up by a significant amount if you smoke. If you're on blood pressure medication, but it's controlling your blood pressure, it increases your risk a little bit, even if your blood pressure is controlled. And then you can just see so if I lower my cholesterol from 7 to 5, what happens to my risk? And you see a very marginal shift. So it gives you a sense, right? When you're wondering, should I go on the statin? What should I do? It helps you make a decision. You can consider your risk factors, you can get some numbers, and you can see, what would the best case scenario do? Or what else could I do? Could I raise my HDL? Could I quit smoking? Could I get younger? Could I lower my blood pressure? All right. Can you see the whole slide? Yeah, okay. Okay, so we're going to talk more about the goodness of cholesterol, but cholesterol is we actually, so we hear a lot about how like high cholesterol diet and don't eat eggs because they have cholesterol. Very little, it's interesting to know that very little dietary cholesterol is actually absorbed, if any. Okay, so it's highly irrelevant how much cholesterol you actually consume. There's actually benefits to eating some of these high cholesterol foods that support cholesterol pathways in synthesizing and clearing and moving cholesterol properly through the body and supporting the liver. But you're actually not going to get a lot of cholesterol from foods that tend to have high cholesterol. So that's interesting to know.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
Yeah.
That's big.
Yeah. So everyone remember. So yeah, eating eggs is not going to raise your cholesterol. No, eating any cholesterol, like foods that have high cholesterol, it's not going to affect your cholesterol. Your liver synthesizes virtually all of the cholesterol that you need in your body. All right. So now different types of fats that you eat will shift your cholesterol profile. And again, your diet can affect how metabolically healthy you are. And that's going to have an impact on your cholesterol, on your liver, on your visceral fat, and your overall metabolism. So that is important. Certain nutrients that you consume are important, but your liver is making your cholesterol. So people that went on, like back in the 50s, when they went on low cholesterol diets, their liver just ramped up synthesis and their cholesterol levels stayed the same. So there's virtually zero benefit to caring about dietary cholesterol and trying to reduce it. And if anything, all it's doing is depriving you of foods that are helpful for optimal metabolic function. Okay.
Right.
So there's a study in Nature. Nature is it's the where they publish the discovery of DNA, double helix. So it's like one of the most prestigious medical journals that there is. And they published a study in 2019, and it looked at 12.8 million adults, and it looked at like, what is the most optimal cholesterol for humans that prevents all-cause mortality. So remember that we were like, okay, we were worried about cholesterol for atherosclerosis. We were worried about atherosclerosis because we were worried about heart disease and stroke. We're worried about heart disease and stroke because we're worried about dying. So why don't we just study cholesterol dying, right? Let's just get right to the dying. That's the most important endpoint that we actually care about. I guess for the purposes of this study. I mean, I care about like, are you functioning optimally and happy and thriving? But let's look at actual like all-cause mortality. So all-cause mortality it just looks at like death. Like, what are your chances of dying from anything? Not just heart disease, because if we only look at people that die from heart disease, we may miss people that die by suicide or that get into accidents and other things that might not seem related to your cholesterol, but might be, because we may not fully understand the whole picture. So it is kind of the best endpoint to study, right? Like, what's the best cholesterol to prevent you from dying from literally anything? A piano falling on your head, anything. And so what they found was it's a U-shaped curve. So when your cholesterol is with uneven U's. So I guess it's kind of like a ladle or like a Big Dipper. So the highest all-cause mortality is at the part of the graph that has the lowest cholesterol. Okay, so you have the most chance of dying if your cholesterol is like 0. Then your chance of dying, sorry that it's so morbid, morbid Wednesday. Your chance of dying decreases. So the bottom of the U, there's like a sort of like it bottoms out. So there's sort of like an optimal range where your chance of dying from any cause is the lowest. And there's a certain level of cholesterol at which we find that your all-cause mortality is the lowest. And then as cholesterol levels start to increase, your all-cause mortality starts to increase a little bit, but it never gets as high as when it's low.
Wow.
Does that make sense? Okay, so it's an uneven U.
Yeah.
So the optimal levels.
A J?
Yeah, like a woo J. Like a kind of a U with like one end a lot higher. Okay. So the optimal levels, and I have the US units, are, so in Canada, 5.4 to 6.4, which is kind of wild because that is routinely flagged as too high in my patients. Okay, so if you think of a total cholesterol, so TC means total cholesterol of 6.4 is often wildly higher than your doctor is going to want it. So this is an example of how this is a big study, 12.8 million people. So they've taken a lot of data, right? And it's the endpoint's all-cause mortality. So they're just letting other factors that could be contributing to this, that like, do people with this level of cholesterol just like, do they make more money? Do they have better shelter, like better life situation and things like that? It's possible, right? Like these are not perfect studies because we don't control their epidemiological studies. So it just looks at like huge populations and measures their cholesterol and measures other factors. They're not perfect, but they're so big that they give us very compelling information. And so the conclusion by these authors was, are our targets set too low, right? Like, are we chasing really low levels they're actually not optimal for preventing death? And so preventing death, or like the lowest all-cause mortality, like prolonging life as long as possible. I guess you could look at it that way. So optimal levels is 5.4 to 6.4 millimoles per liter. Much higher, I guarantee, than your doctor will want it. If you have blood work in front of you, always obtain a copy of your blood work, everyone. Always ask your doctor for a copy so you can have it on your records. You can reference your numbers. But if you have a copy of your blood work, look at your total cholesterol. Find is usually on page 2 or 3 of blood work, and see what your number is. And so you want to be 5.4, 6.4 was associated with the lowest all-cause mortality in all adults. And then they had different cohorts. So men age 18 to 34, young men, it was a little bit lower. And women, it was even lower than that. Women age 18 to 34. So these are younger women, teenagers, early 20s, early 30s. And then 35 to 44, it was slightly lower too, 4.6 to 5.6. But still, 5.6, you're often going to get. So the Canadian targets, they want total under 5.2 if you have no other risk factors. So you can already see that's lower than optimal for the majority of humans. They found generally that if cholesterol was 5.1, under 5.1, they had, there was a stronger association. So once your cholesterol started going under 5.1, there's a stronger probability that the lower it got, the more your risk factor for all-cause mortality increased. All right. Versus like if it started to get really high, like 8 or 9, the increase in risk of all-cause mortality wasn't as strong. Okay. I should have just shown the graph. Okay, so the conclusion is the ideal is somewhere between 4.1 to 6.4, depending on your age, and lower cholesterol is more of a risk factor for all-cause mortality. So this is like the ultimate endpoint for any scientific study than high cholesterol.
Right.
Okay. Now, so why does cholesterol, when it's too low, what is the problem? Like, what is happening? So there's a huge connection to mental health and cholesterol. And this is why I see it so often in my practice, why I flag it so often, because there's a certain like symptom picture in people that have low cholesterol that I see. I'll explain kind of the vibe of the patient. So they typically have like low executive functioning. So executive functioning are your ability to find words, initiate tasks, gather momentum in completing a task, finish the task. So you're making a sandwich, you have food in your fridge because you went grocery shopping because you remembered to replenish your fridge. You get the bread out, you put the plate out, you make the sandwich, you put things away, you eat your sandwich, you put it away. So like all of these different components to initiating, completing a task in order to achieve a goal. Okay, so executive functioning is essentially what we're doing all the time. We are maxed out with our executive functioning in modern society. So people that are experiencing executive dysfunction, this is very common in people with ADHD, they tend to have a lot of procrastination, like a lot of difficulty focusing, concentrating. They tend to feel like things are kind of chaotic. They feel overwhelmed. They like things are messy. It's like the artist, right? It's like everything is kind of just up in the air, right? It's just like the kitchen cupboard doors are open, sinks full of food. So executive functioning is like Okay, so the best example of this, if you've ever seen the movie Limitless, is so has anyone ever seen this movie? You can put in the chat if you have. It's Bradley Cooper. He takes this medication that allows him to use 100% of his brain. And it shows him before, and he's kind of like, his apartment's a giant mess. His girlfriend thinks he's a loser. He's just like, he's trying to finish his book, but he's like procrastinating. He's totally ineffective. Like everything's a mess. Then he takes this medication. The first thing he does is he cleans his apartment. He helps his neighbor write her dissertation. He finishes his book in the afternoon. And then that's like executive functioning.
Right.
Okay, so basically the whole book is about like good brain function, or the whole movie is about good brain function. So the patient will have like kind of low executive function, low mood. It's kind of like a very like sluggish, like kind of foggy brain. They have difficulty finding words. They feel depressed. They may feel like irritable and aggressive. This occurs a lot. They may, experience sort of hormonal irregulation, like PMDD type symptoms. So some studies show that cholesterol under 5.2 millimoles a liter is associated. And so this is a little bit lower than that all-cause mortality optimal range. But when it starts to go under 5.2, it's associated with poor performance on cognitive measures like verbal fluency, attention, concentration, abstract reasoning. So people's cognitive abilities start to decline when their total cholesterol starts to drop. It's a very bad thing. So this is, when I see people, this is why, guys, I made these Instagram posts, because when people will come in and they're like, my doctor says my cholesterol is too high, I'm on a statin, I'm taking care of my health, I'm preventing heart disease. I'm like, you are starving your brain. Okay, so this is like the whole thing of like empowerment, staying up to date with the research, right? Like one of the criticisms of of the medical system, like practice in general, is that we're often very far behind current research. It takes a long time for a study like Nature to publish a huge study for like your GP in a standard practice with their 10,000 patients or whoever to catch up to the research. Because it takes a lot it's like a tidal wave, right? It's like you've got these medical guidelines, you've got the government regulations, you've got these conferences that you go to, and it's like a wave that pushes you along. And then it's like, hey, we got a new study, and it takes a while to kind of slow the train, educate everyone, and change our practice methods. So that's like a benefit, at least, to being an ND, that we have a little bit more of like a free floating autonomy, and you start from the patient up, and so it's, a lot, you really, I think in this day and age, have to be an advocate for yourself when you're a patient. You have to, learn, research, don't just believe me, I can find these references for you. So when cholesterol levels started to go under 5.2, then people started to decline their cognitive performance. And this is because 60% of our brain's dry mass, so if you just take your brain and dehydrate it, which you should not do, but if you did that in the lab.
Don't try that at home.
Yeah, don't try it at home. Don't put your brain in a dehydrator. 60% of it would be cholesterol. So cholesterol is forming your brain. So when you're so what a statin does is prevents your body from being able to synthesize cholesterol. And so now your brain is just like, has no way to reproduce itself, to maintain itself, to repair things. A quarter of the cholesterol in the body is located in the central nervous system. So that's your brain, your nerves, your spinal cord. And this is, regulating impulses to and from the body. It's allowing me to wiggle my fingers, talk to you, take in information, see things, eyes. Now, you might have heard of the condition multiple sclerosis, and you might be vaguely aware of the symptoms, right? That people have difficulty. They have usually a lot of cognitive decline. They have a lot of motor impairment. And the reason, so what's happening in MS is that the myelin of the nerves is being broken down by the immune system. So the myelin is like the coating on your nervous system. We cell membranes. So your nervous system is an electrical system. Its job is to send electricity. Like we're electric. We send electricity via sodium and potassium through our nervous system. So if you think of like, the electrical wiring, there's a lot of like house analogies in biology and in physiology. So if you think of like the electrical wiring in your house, you've got these wires, these copper wires that are insulated by rubber, right? Or whatever it is now, plastic and you need that rubber. If rats get inside your house and they start chewing on the wires, you start to get short circuiting. You don't have these impulses. You need the membrane, you need the rubber. And in our body's case, it's myelin, which is formed by cholesterol and these other phospholipids. They improve nerve impulses. So somebody who doesn't have enough cell membranes, they usually describe this raw anxiety. My friend will always say it. She's like, my nerves are raw. I feel like a baby with no skin. She's like, I feel jittery. I feel like bottom up anxiety.
Like
I just feel, twitchy. I feel twitchy. I feel jumpy. I feel like, and we often will say, eat more fat. Fat supports the nervous system. It helps kind of coat your nerves, and you really can you can kind of anthropomorphize your own symptoms, but you feel that you're like, oh, I feel a lot more here, calm, like able to think, like have a flowing thought that has a beginning, middle, end, as opposed to like that skittery, jumpy, dysregulated feeling. We also need the cell membranes to keep contents in our cells. So our cells are covered in a cell membrane. A cell is like a ball that's full of all the things that we need to function. And then you just multiply those cells by like trillions and you have a human body. And so it matters the coating of those cells. If our cell membranes are too fluid, you get cells that break apart, stuff falls out. If our cell membranes are too rigid, you don't get proper signaling, you don't get things entering and leaving the cell properly. Cholesterol is helping. It's part of the cell membrane. It helps to maintain fluidity and strength of cell membranes. So that's kind of a good analogy for cholesterol, right? If you think of your nervous system and your mood, right? I am fluid and strong. I'm flexible, but I am solid. Mm-hmm. So I'm neither anxious nor depressed, right? I'm here. I'm focused. And then cholesterol also plays a role in neuronal signaling. So make sure that the neurons are talking to each other properly, your brain cells, and neurotransmitter signaling. So it's involved in opioids, our own feel-good chemicals, our endogenous opioids, and involved in dopamine, serotonin, the stress chemicals. So it's making sure that everything is organized properly in your brain. Low cholesterol alters the production of serotonin, so it impairs serotonin production and the availability of serotonin in the brain. And so there was a study in the 90s that showed that people with low cholesterol were they were more at risk of dying from suicide. And usually, trigger warning, and usually it's violent suicide. And then they start to see this association with low cholesterol and aggression and violence. This has been replicated in primates. And this starts to manifest itself when total cholesterol is under 4. And then again, like I said, when I see so many people whose total is under 4, usually it doesn't get that low unless you're on a statin. But it's a concern, because I don't know if doctors are aware that there is a lower limit to what you should be pushing someone's cholesterol. So under 4 millimeters or millimoles per liter, you start to see depression, suicide, addiction relapse, executive dysfunction, cognitive decline, and Alzheimer's. And so more optimal is over 5.2. And then you saw that like 5.4 to 5.5, 6.4 range. Again, much higher than you typically will hear the target. So it's always a good idea to, like, when your doctor's like, your cholesterol's high, it's like, okay, that's fantastic. Can I grab a copy of my blood work? And then just like take those numbers. And if you need to convert the units, do that on the internet, and then you can write them down, and then you can, so you can compare them to these numbers, and you can do your own research. I know that's become a meme, do your own research, but I stand by it. Do your own research and then go to someone for guidance that can help you sort through it. All right. So cholesterol and your hormones. So you need cholesterol to make hormones. Cholesterol is what your hormones are made of. And I gave you the pathway. So here you go.
Yeah.
You see cholesterol's at the top. And then it goes pregnenolone, progesterone. How many of you have heard about how great progesterone is? And then you also need to make cortisol at the end. Aldosterone's an adrenal hormone for regulating your sodium potassium levels, testosterone, and your estrogen, estradiol, estriol, estrone. These are all forms, the three estrogens. Okay, so when we're always like optimizing progesterone, optimizing estrogen, and let's take bioidentical hormones, and how do I get my hormones working? Well, this is it's like, how do I build a house? I start with a load of bricks, right? So you're starting with cholesterol. And so one of the things your body's making cholesterol for, in addition to cell membranes, brain function, nervous system function, antioxidant function, managing endotoxins from your gut, it's making it for hormones. So I have seen some vegan, I'm sort of single you out, but some vegan, vegetarian patients who have low cholesterol, usually teenage girls that have issues with their periods. So they usually have a lot of mood disorder, and they have like often low hormones, like, irregular periods, amenorrhea. And again, like I said, you can't absorb cholesterol from your diet, but there are certain foods, they're mostly animal foods, that support the synthesis of cholesterol, and you need saturated fats. Saturated fats from the right sources and other fats are important for cholesterol synthesis. So
what would examples of those sources be?
So like eggs, red meat, but also fish, omega-3s are helpful for like shifting your cholesterol panel. We'll talk about this, but like, if your cholesterol panel is like suboptimal, like you have low HDL, higher LDL, your cholesterol HDL ratio is a little bit off. Like, we're looking at the overall pattern. Fish oil, omega-3s can help shift. They can reduce triglycerides. They can slightly raise HDL and lower LDL. MUFAs, monounsaturated fatty acids from olive oil, can help raise HDL and lower LDL. And saturated fats will raise HDL and LDL. So like coconut oil, it'll raise HDL and LDL. So it'll raise HDL in almost everyone, and it will raise LDL in some people. And so some people have just like a genetic predisposition to have an increase in LDL in response to saturated fat. So it might be worth it for those individuals who are concerned to do the ApoB, ApoA1 ratio. I know it's a $70 test, but if you want peace of mind, but then I'll also help you with other factors to look at.
I think that this chart that you're showing us is really, really important for women over 40. Yeah. Which puts us in the peri and post-menopause category that, we're complaining about testosterone, estrogen levels, progesterone, and this whole concept of cholesterol as the precursor hormone to all of that is something that I see overlooked a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, it's not like just more cholesterol can, now sometimes the opposite happens. So during perimenopause, some women can get an increase in cholesterol, right? So there's almost this like feedback of the body's like, okay, we have this backlog now of the precursor. So that's a possibility. But what's happening, a significant thing that's happening in perimenopause and menopause is that as we lose progesterone and estrogen, we become more insulin resistant. And if someone already has a pattern of insulin resistance, it never usually comes out of nowhere. There's a pattern of insulin resistance being under-muscled, and we often will start to see that really rear its head. So people start to get more abdominal weight gain. They start to feel more fatigue, more craving sugar, gaining weight, and noticing that body shape change that all of a sudden like reveals itself really quickly. Right. So it's really important to look at that, because we often think it's my hormones, but it's usually an underlying thing that's the hormones were protecting you from in some way.
And then am I correct to say that you're also saying that increase in cholesterol, which people often start to see in late perimenopause and menopause, you're saying that's not the fault of the eggs? Like, don't blame
it's not. Yes. No. Yeah. Like, well, because you're not even absorbing the cholesterol from the eggs in a significant manner. It's not eating fat. Yeah. You're not going to get like a massive spike in LDL from dietary fat. It's just people can't eat that much fat. Now, though, what raises triglycerides? Fructose. Okay, so, and we do care about triglycerides because triglycerides, like we said, associated with insulin resistance, associated with abdominal, visceral fat, fatty liver, more inflammatory. So high fructose diets will tend to raise triglycerides. Fructose from fruit, not so much. I'm thinking like high fructose corn syrup. Table sugar is a glucose and a fructose stuck together. So you're getting, fructose tastes sweet. So sweet taste. You could think of it like that. And fruit does have fructose, but it's more protective because there's more water, there's more vitamins, there's more fiber. And I would recommend people not consume fruit alone as a snack, like consume it maybe after a meal for dessert, or consume it as like with nuts and things that are gonna put some clothes on your carbs. This glucose goddess on Instagram, she talks about that. She's like, put clothes on your carbs.
Love that.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So low cholesterol. So we also need it for vitamin D, and it's not here, but actually maybe it is. Oh yeah. DHEAS. So that's the dehydroepiandrosterone, which is a very important molecule that helps protect you from stress. And this is it makes your estrogen for you after menopause. So your estrogen goes to your DHEAS gets converted to estrogen. So optimizing DHEAS is really important. And there's an inverse relationship between cortisol and DHEAS. So the more cortisol you have, the lower your DHEAS, and vice versa. So this is the stress, another relationship with the stress, perimenopause symptom connection. Vitamin D is a steroid hormone, so is vitamin A, and they all are synthesized from cholesterol. Your body makes vitamin D from cholesterol molecules on your skin. When sunlight, hits cholesterol molecules on your skin. So when if you have low cholesterol and there's not enough to sit on your skin to make vitamin D, even you can get all the sunlight you want, you might not be synthesizing D. And, we know, and you probably have heard, especially throughout the COVID years, that vitamin D supports the immune system, reduces autoimmunity, supports mood, important for bone health, and so on and so on, hormonal function. And we see an association with low cholesterol and an increased risk of cancer, hemorrhagic stroke. So there's two types of stroke. There's atherosclerotic, ischemic. Oh my God. And then there's hemorrhagic. So one is a blockage of an artery to the brain. Another is bleeding in the brain. So my grandfather, but oftentimes it's like, oh, it's a stroke. So my grandfather had a stroke a couple of years ago. I accompanied him to the stroke clinic at Toronto Western. And it was a hemorrhagic stroke because when he moved from Ottawa to Toronto, the doctor he saw doubled his statin dose on him. And so ended up with a hemorrhagic stroke. And so he's good, he's recovering, but there's, sometimes after that, there's a section of the brain that doesn't recover. It's associated with depression and anxiety, low cholesterol, as we talked about. Yeah, it's a depressing talk. Sorry, guys. Hopefully it'll start to become empowering. Metabolic syndrome. Okay, so we talk a lot about this, right? Metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance. What is your metabolism? It's how your body takes energy and uses it. That's like the best way to think of metabolism. How do you break? How do you think of your bank account? In your bank account at any given time, there's stuff going in, there's stuff coming out. So how much are you storing in your savings? How much are you spending with your checking? What's in your credit card? What's in all these different accounts? And how is your general state of abundance in your life? How does that manifest as your state, right? If you have more money, you could buy a Ferrari, or you could pay for a bus pass, or whatever you want, right? If your money is somehow locked in a long-term savings account, you could be a billionaire, but you can't access that money. And so you could be functionally poor, or you could be spending like crazy and really have nothing and be like, kind of in debt, I guess. I don't know. Our body doesn't really go into debt, but so metabolic syndrome is an issue with the spending and savings. A lot is going into savings. You're not able to access that savings to spend money. And so for your body, that looks like everything your body does, your immune system, your mood, your muscle mass, being able to tap into body fat to use for energy. That's what fat is for. Our digestive function, like mental energy. So when people say like, I don't have energy, there's a bunch of different kinds of energy. We usually are saying that we feel sleepy or that we feel physically tired, but there's also the lack of motivation. Like all of that is energy. So metabolic syndrome there's this connection between dyslipidemia. So this is the like high LDL, low HDL, high triglycerides. The cholesterol panel's like out of whack. You got a low cholesterol HDL ratio. You'd probably have a high ApoB, ApoA1 ratio. Your blood pressure is high. 120/80 is like a good standard blood pressure, but there's different targets depending on whether you're on medication or not. So yeah, there's usually hypertension, there's abdominal visceral fat. Like I said, the way you can tell is you can't grab this fat. So you can't pinch it, the pinch and inch thing. And often visceral fat is associated with a facial fat, which is very interesting. Like I learned that recently. I think that's recent research. So people that are noticing like, oh, I'm noticing like my face is getting thinner is actually a good indication you're losing some of that problematic visceral fat. Now, when you have visceral fat, that's where all your organs are. It's where your liver is. Liver is in charge of regulating our metabolism. It's like the big orchestrator of our metabolism, of digestion. And so fat starts to accumulate on the liver. The liver starts to become more inflamed. It stops being able to function optimally. With metabolic syndrome, you end up with a high fasting insulin. It might be normal in your blood range. The blood range is very high and it's rarely tested. So you have to ask for the test. And you have to obtain the results. And then you can run your fasting insulin, your fasting glucose through a calculator that will tell you your level of insulin resistance. Okay. Now, sometimes you might have elevated fasting glucose, but very often people don't. I just saw a patient who had very normal fasting glucose, but had very high fasting insulin. It was still in range, it was quite high. She had extremely high insulin resistance. She had symptoms so she had very high triglycerides, low HDL, and we started to see some elevated liver enzymes indicating that her liver was inflamed and struggling at this point. So this, like, if you think of the continuum of events, she's already moved quite far along, but her fasting glucose, if that's all you're looking at, she looks totally healthy.
Wow.
And so this is the, when people are like, oh, my doctor says I'm healthy. I looked at my blood and I'm healthy. I'm like, and I'm not, that's great if you're healthy, but it's let's actually be certain of it by doing proper testing and looking at things and optimizing how you feel, and then not, wait 20 years and like, oh yeah, okay, now you're diabetic. Where did that come from? It's genetic, So you don't necessarily have to have fasting glucose. Your glucose could be totally normal, but once glucose starts to become elevated, it's showing again that things are moving in that direction. And like you're basically, your insulin is no longer able to compensate and manage the glucose and keep it down. So yeah, you want to get fasting insulin tested. You want to do your fasting glucose. Fasting means 8 hours without food, just water. And then you can plug those numbers into the HOMA-IR calculator. You can Google that. You can find that on the internet for free. You put those numbers in, you got to change the units. It'll tell you how to do it. And then you can see what your number is. And you want that number to be under 1.9. And so, 88% of people either using the HOMA-IR or a glucose tolerance test where you drink a giant glug of glucose. It tastes absolutely horrific. 75 grams of glucose. So first you test your fasting insulin, your fasting glucose, then you drink the glucose drink, and then you go back 2 hours later and you see how does your body respond and deal with that glucose load. And so if someone has impaired glucose metabolism, they have really high postprandial after eating glucose and really wildly high insulin. And then what usually happens then is that your blood sugar tanks and that you feel like absolute garbage. And then you're really craving sugar and you feel anxious and you feel irritated and your brain can't really function. But often we don't even notice that, So with metabolic syndrome, the liver is involved. The liver is this like kind of the organ that's at the crux of it all. It's getting affected by this. And it's also, it's like a vicious cycle. Like when the liver is affected by this, it has a difficult time making cholesterol properly, processing the cholesterol, regulating blood glucose. And so you'll see like elevated triglycerides, low HDL. You might find elevated liver enzymes. So in pretty standard blood work, your doctor might test one or all of the liver enzymes. And these are molecules that your liver produces when it's under distress. So examples are like alkaline phosphatase, gamma glutamyl transferase, and we have like short names for them: ALP, ALT, GGT, AST. And, your liver is really important for processing, not just regulating your blood sugar and making cholesterol, but also it's the filter. It's the Brita filter of the body. That's where all the toxins from our environment are passing through. That's where the hormones are passing through, so we can clear them when we don't need them anymore. And so how that might be relevant is that if it's kind of like taking out the garbage. So you order takeout, you eat the food, now you have the takeout container. That needs to go in the recycling, then you put your recycling on the curb, and then the recycling people come and take it away. So if there's a backlog, if you're having trouble, like remembering to take your recycling out, you're going to end up with this accumulation of takeout. And what your body tends to do with that is say, okay, I'm not going to order any more food then. So if you're making hormones and then those hormones are getting broken down into their metabolites, and some of those metabolites may produce symptoms that we don't want, more anxiety, more of the estrogen dominance kind of symptoms that we don't want, more weight gain, things like that, heavier periods, irritation, stuff like that. Your body's like, okay, well, there's enough of this estrogen metabolite, so let's not make new estrogen. So it can block that pathway. So you need to be able to clear that metabolite out of your system. So your body's like, oh, okay, now we need to make fresh estrogen. We need to ramp up production. Don't know if that makes sense. A lot of stuff is kind of like complicated. So your liver needs methionine and choline, which are two ingredients found in meat and eggs, to function optimally. And there are so we know we can make someone have fatty liver by simply depriving them of choline. So mice, if you want them to have fatty liver, all you do is take away their choline and methionine. You put them on a low choline, low methionine diet, and the mice all get fatty liver. People who are in the hospital, who are receiving parental nutrition is like IV nutrition. It's not from your parents. Your parents, the IV. If they forget to put choline, and I guess this must have happened back in the day, if choline is not in the feeding tube or in the IV nutrition, all the patients get fatty liver. And so you can imagine they're not eating too much food, right? It's literally IV nutrition. So it's not an over abundance of donuts or something like that. It's just a deprivation of choline. So choline is widely known to prevent fatty liver. Choline you find in eggs and meat to a lesser extent, and liver. Liver is the most abundant source of choline. So meat and eggs. So that's one reason to eat eggs. Now, I don't know, this is a real quick aside, a little bit of a tangent, but so you can put in the chat, if you've seen some of the news stuff, it comes through my feed. It comes through my algorithms. It might not come through yours, that eggs are associated with blood clots. Has anyone heard this? Eggs, like,
let me check the chat.
Somebody reminded me of this because when I shared the promo of eat the damn eggs or eat the darn eggs.
Yeah.
Somebody was like, and now they cause blood clots, I heard, like a joke. So choline, the eggs, blood clots, and now it's like scaring everyone. They're like, we can't eat eggs. So choline in the gut can be converted into something called TMAO. Right. And this is a molecule that is associated with blood clots, and it's associated with cardiovascular disease. Now, fish, which we know is good for your heart and good for your cardiovascular system, is the highest food in TMAO. It just actually contains TMAO. And so it seems to me that TMAO is not the only factor to consider when thinking of heart disease risk, right? So in and of itself, it's probably not enough of an influence to affect your heart disease. And choline gets converted to TMAO in a dysbiotic gut. So a gut that has a lot of yeast overgrowth, a lot of bad bacteria. So if you're concerned with so this might just be helpful to know, like, what are they talking about when they say eggs cause blood clots? Like, what the heck is that? That's the mechanism that they're afraid of. They haven't proved that eggs actually cause blood clots. All they know is that eggs cause choline. Choline can be converted to TMAO, and TMAO is associated with blood clots. All right. So this is the thing a lot. It's like cholesterol is bad because it causes heart disease. Well, maybe it causes atherosclerosis, and atherosclerosis causes heart disease. Right. So we have to be careful who we're blaming. So is it the eggs, or it's like this leap of logic that's happening? And so if you're concerned about that, then looking at gut health is important. But phosphatidylcholine is something I routinely recommend for people with a suboptimal lipid panel, with fatty liver for sure, gallstones for sure, and a lot of the cell membrane dysfunction. Choline, phosphatidylcholine are really, really good supplements. And you can get choline from liver and eggs if you want to get it from food. So we talked about this a little bit, but I dedicated a slide to it. So the big question to ask is, why is LDL high? If somebody is has really high LDL, maybe it's there for a reason. And that reason could be that their body is trying to manage lipopolysaccharide produced from dysbiotic gut bacteria. So, and the type of LDL most associated with atherosclerosis, VLDL, very low density lipoprotein, is the type of cholesterol that gets synthesized to manage LPS. So when you have high levels of LPS in your body will make more LDL, and it downregulates HDL. So you end up with low HDL, high LDL. Usually people have like gut symptoms. They have a lot of inflammation. You're probably not going to have gas and bloating, but you're going to have a lot of systemic symptoms that an ND could start to recognize as something's going on with your gut. Like we tend to think that we're going to feel like pain in our gut, or we're going to be we're going to have bloating in our gut. But we don't really have pain receptors in the gut. All we feel is stretch. So unless there's gas or something stretching your intestines, you're not really going to feel much. You can feel stomach pain. You can feel an inflamed stomach lining, because your stomach is such an acidic environment that if your stomach lining is inflamed and can't protect you from the acid, you're going to feel that, especially maybe after or before meals or on an empty stomach. But you're not really going to feel like colonic inflammation unless you're having bowel movements. Like there's only specific circumstances that are going to that these symptoms will manifest in. So it's good to do an assessment with an ND or somebody who's paying attention to things and how it connects. But if you have a lot of gram-negative bacteria, so pathogenic bacteria in the gut, it is producing this endotoxin that gets absorbed into our system, and our body is trying to manage that and keep you healthy by making LDL. So this is an example of like your body is trying to help you, and then we're like, no, get out of here, fireman. Why are you always here every time everything's on fire? So by blocking cholesterol synthesis, now you're going to have more LPS in your system. And we know that. So if you inject mice with lipopolysaccharide or endotoxin, they get depressed, severe depression, they get inflamed. And so it has a very negative effect on the brain and mood. And this is like part of the gut-brain connection.
Right. Yeah.
And so there's this like kind of old school, he's kind of like this guru nutritionist guy called Ray Peat, and he recommends raw carrot. He has his Ray Peat carrot salad. You can Google it. It's actually pretty yummy. He likes raw carrots because he says they absorb endotoxin. It's probably true. They have a good amount of fiber. They've beta carotene. They're good for you. So can't hurt if you like carrots. He like shaves carrots and he throws raisins in it. And then he does like apple cider vinegar and olive oil and different things. So, can't hurt. Eat a couple carrots. Probiotics and prebiotics. So certain probiotics can help reset the bacteria in the gut. So if someone has a lot of if they have a lot of LDL, everything else kind of looks normal, like their cholesterol panel is a bit off, and there's some signs of gut dysfunction. We might go, all disease begins in the gut. We might take a gut-centered approach. And so the probiotics S. boulardii and L. rhamnosus, which is actually culturelle, those are both helpful for reducing gram-negative bacteria, and they can help reduce lipopolysaccharide. You can heal the gut dysbiosis through herbs that kill the bad bacteria, preserve the good bacteria. You can change the diet. You can do different things for gut support. There's many layers to gut health. And often we start kind of basic and then we get more into it depending on how someone responds. Omega-3s are helpful. We're going to find that they're also helpful. Like we're going to learn they lower triglycerides and they moderately support HDL and LDL. Olive oil has polyphenols. So not only does it help with HDL, LDL, supporting cholesterol panel and optimizing it, it also helps manage, the gut and support the gut. Polyphenols from green tea, healthy fats, lower carb diet. So one of the general patterns I see is that people tend to center their diet around carbohydrates, and carbohydrates are not bad for you, but when you're eating a very high carb diet and you're not like an athlete, it tends to put you more in a blood sugar roller coaster, and it deprives you of being able to eat enough good fats and protein to function optimally. And maybe that's one of the reasons. It's not so much that we're eating so many carbs, is I don't think we're eating enough protein and fat to clothe our carbs and to balance our blood sugar. And so we're seeing a lot of these like blood sugar roller coasters eventually leading to metabolic dysfunction. All right, statins. So statins are the most prescribed drug in North America. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. I'm going to say multi-billion-dollar industry. So, if you're a conspiracy theorist, well, you don't need to be a conspiracy theorist. This is just capitalism. So they work by blocking HMG-CoA reductase, which is an enzyme that makes cholesterol. So they literally just block cholesterol right at the source. So your liver wants to make cholesterol because it's got jobs to do. It's got to make antioxidants. It's got to build brain cells. It's got to handle these endotoxins that are being secreted into your bloodstream. And sounds like, nope, you cannot make it. We are halting this construction site. You've got all these bricks, but we're not going to allow you to build a house. So they come with several side effects you can imagine, right? So the thing with medication is that they're like, you could think of like a river, right? So there's many different paths to a river. And if you go way upstream and you block the river because you're like, oh, I don't like how that river goes like southwest and where it ends up. But it also goes east and like, southeast, and it goes all these different other areas. And it fills up this person's water basin. It fills up that person's well and that person's pond where they swim. But I'm just going to block it upstream at the waterfall. Now all these other downstream pathways are affected. So what you start to see with statins is you get increased insulin resistance, 70% increase. Okay, so if you're already dealing with insulin resistance, now you're on which is the main risk factor for cardiovascular disease, contributing to inflammation, influencing metabolic syndrome, probably the reason why triglycerides are high and HDL is low. Now you go on a statin and you end up with more insulin resistance, or you increase your chances of getting it if you don't already have it. Rhabdomyolysis is muscle pain. This is a commonly known side effect of statins. And why is that happening? Because your mitochondria, which are your muscle is rich with, your brain is rich with, are being damaged by the statin. Erectile dysfunction, similar mechanism. It's affecting blood flow. So those are the most common side effects. You might also get cognitive dysfunction. I had actually, just quick aside, I had a whole family that came to see me. They cooked with vegetable oil. So that was their main cooking oil. And a colleague that saw them before me told them to switch to avocado oil. So they did. And like the child's ADHD went away. The mother's fibroids improved and her endometriosis improved. And the husband was on a statin. His cholesterol like dropped like crazy. His LDL went to 1 point something and he was having brain fog, rage, aggression, depression. He was having difficulty like putting words together. And so we had to and he was very hesitant to come off the statin, right? Because someone he trusted put him on it. But so it's interesting how effective diet can be just by improving the cooking oil. So avocado oil is MUFA, it's monounsaturated, similar to olive oil. And vegetable oil is high in omega-6, highly inflammatory. it's pushing at more inflammatory pathways, and it's increasing, like it's pushing the cholesterol panel in the wrong direction. All these seed oils that we hear about, not the best for us. And so, yeah, diet had a miraculous effect on all of them, because fats are so important for all these different things, for our hormones, for our brain, for our for our mood. And then, the statin was just pushing him way too low. So we tried to kind of, half dose, still way too low. Okay, let's try coming off. Okay, now we're great. So, so one of the things that statins do is deplete CoQ10, which is an antioxidant that we need for fertility, for brain health, mitochondrial function, heart muscle, skeletal muscle. So a more comprehensive MD will put you on CoQ10, tell you to take CoQ10 if you're on a statin. That should be best practice. That's like written into the guidelines, because CoQ10 is really important for heart health, and you're supposedly put on the statin to support heart health, right? It depletes fat soluble vitamins, because we know those come from cholesterol, vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, and K. And it also depletes B vitamins, B9 and B12, also important for mitochondrial function. So it's important, so what happens? Your doctor wants you on a statin, obtain your blood work, find out what the numbers are, do a little bit of research, ask your doctor what their ideal targets are. Okay, because your doctor might be like, I don't know, just lower, just under 5.2. But remember that 5.2, under 5.2 is going to start to increase things like all-cause mortality, cognitive dysfunction. And if you start to get under 4 millimoles per liter, now you're increasing a host of mental health issues. So keep that in mind. You could, print out some studies and tell them about that.
So just to be clear, though, you're not telling people who are on statins to just stop taking their statins tomorrow.
No, because you need to be monitoring your levels. So you need to know,
yes.
what's your starting point.
And you need to be working with someone, right? Making sure that you are dealing with the underlying conditions of what's actually going on.
Yeah. So go to someone, work with somebody who's willing to help you. Now some people are it's too low. So I never take people, I don't have the prescribing power to prescribe a statin, so I can't wean you, which means prescribe a half dose or something like that. And I can't take you off it. It's not my scope of practice. So what I usually will say is cholesterol panel will come through. It can be frustrating because it's one of us speaking Greek, one of us speaking Italian. So, their cholesterol panel is coming, their total cholesterol is 3.5. Okay. So I'm like, okay, well, yeah, you're experiencing a lot of mental health issues. You've got low mood. You've got brain fog. Your cholesterol is way too low. Oh yeah, I've always had high cholesterol. My doctor told me. So sometimes I give them a little bit of a script to help. Okay, well, tell your doctor that you've been working on your diet and lifestyle. There's also part of it is how do you bridge the communication gap, right? What your doctor wants you to be healthy. They also want to be a responsible practitioner too, right? It's not like they're out to get you. So yeah, if you use the language they understand, it's just knowing, if you're I'm seeing a naturopath and we're doing breathing exercises, they're gonna be But if you're well, I've been working on my health, my diet and exercise, and I think that I would like to come off of my statin. And then they might say, okay, let's do a half dose, let's do none. It's always up to you, right? But I would do this guided, and it is good to have a team rather than this idea of second opinion, right? Is have a team of people. People are going to be looking at your case, your health from different angles. There may be you're ultimately in the driver's seat. So there might be two differing opinions coming at you. It would, who do you trust? Well, yourself. How do you develop that trust? Taking in the information, weighing it. And a lot of this, right, is this idea of being responsible. Responsible doesn't mean for your own health. It doesn't mean you're the only one, you're on your own. It just means ultimately we are the ones that are going to deal with the consequences of our health, right? Your doctor's not going to get muscle pain if you're on a statin. So being aware of things, asking questions. Sometimes we don't know the questions to ask, so I can help patients with that, right? What are the targets you want to see? Okay, so you say my cholesterol is high. Well, what's my 10-year Framingham risk? And your doctor might be whoa, she knows about that. Okay. Sometimes just knowing, like when I say doctor, I never say I'm a naturopath, but I will just like ask those kind of questions, and you get a great response. And it helps. It really helps to navigate the healthcare system when you just have, when you kind of understand what the practitioner's thinking, what their thought process is. The problem, right, in our system is that we don't always, so I try and share my thought process with patients, but we have enough time for that. Whereas if you have a 15-minute, a visit with an MD, they don't always have that time. But if you know the questions to get to, if you have like the list in front of you, you can have a much better conversation, Right. And, your doctor wants you to be successful. They want you to be healthy. They want you to understand, the risks of not taking something. They want you to be aware, and they want you to be informed. Like, no doctor wants a patient that's just like doesn't understand what's going on. So if you ask the right questions, you're more likely for them to be like, okay, you started exercising and you started eating well, with these big things. And okay, so maybe let's try and decrease your statin. And you might bring the nature study in and be like, hey, I just read this and saw that, that under 5.1 is associated with increased all-cause mortality. Tell me about this, doctor. And they might be like, I've never seen this before, or, oh, that's interesting. So it's just creating a conversation, asking questions, It's hard. It's not easy. You often need guidance. Like when I broke my foot, and I was like waiting an hour and a half to see the orthopedic surgeon, and I'd like forget the question, like, can I drive? Right? Like I'd forget the question. So it's good to have them written down, be prepared. And this is how we kind of advocate for patient advocacy, a big word now in the healthcare system. We know our healthcare system is really overloaded these days. So the more patients are able to advocate, the better able you are to get good care, and the better able you are to be heard, right? And to have your needs met. We shouldn't always assume that those needs are just going to be met for us. Right. Unfortunately, it's sad, but yeah. So yeah, never just come off, start the conversation, and know that it is ultimately your choice, but it's good to do it informed, So what do we do? What would I do? Someone's like, so a lot of the time, people will come to me early. It's the best time to come, not, it's like, oh, my doctor said I have high cholesterol. Okay. And then they say, okay, let me think about it. And then they may book in with me. Maybe they already see me. And so what we're looking at is like the individual, right? We're not treating your labs, we're treating you. So is there insulin resistance? Is there metabolic syndrome? That we got to prioritize. How's your liver functioning? Is there inflammation? Is your blood viscous? So this is one thing I didn't add, is that atherosclerosis is far more likely to manifest in someone with inflammation and viscous blood. So like thicker blood. So you might have, so if you have certain levels, like they're at the bottom, CRP, ESR, fibrinogen, if those are elevated in your blood, it's showing that your blood's more viscous, then elevated cholesterol is more of a concern, right? If you have, there's little evidence that high cholesterol in the absence of inflammation is a problem. But if you have a lot of and then what they think that statins do to prevent a second heart attack. So statins are the best at preventing a second heart attack, not your first one. If you've already had a heart attack, then they reduce your chances of getting a second by 33%. It's actually about 1% if your chances are 3. I know there's a kind of confusing the way I said that, but you can think of it as like statins are best for secondary prevention. But one of the proposed mechanisms is not that they're lowering cholesterol, it's that they're lowering inflammation. So inflammation may be the more important thing to focus on. And so, and what inflammation does is kind of lowers blood inflammation raises the viscosity of your blood, makes it more likely to clot. We care about gut health. So you want to make sure that you're not producing tons of endotoxin that your body's trying to manufacture LDL and VLDL to manage. And relevant tests are fasting insulin, fasting glucose, HbA1c, which looks at your glucose control over time. This is a common test. It's probably tested every time you get a physical. CRP, ESR, and fibrinogen, these test inflammatory levels, blood viscosity, and the liver enzymes, AST, ALT, ALP, GGT. This is like a liver panel. It looks like, that should be not lighting up at all. So the liver panel should be like quiet, no abnormal findings. If you have elevated liver enzymes, that's showing that your liver is under distress. And so we said treat the individual. Another of our naturopathic principles is treat the cause. Similar idea. So we want to, like with treat the individual, we want to get to the bottom of it. Like, what other factors? How's your gut? What other lab markers are showing up? What other things do we need to test? What more information do we need? Treat the cause is, well, we actually need cholesterol for hormone function, brain function, antioxidants, soaking up endotoxin. So, how do we support your body's needs and reduce your risk of heart attack and stroke and support your cardiovascular health? And so we want to reduce inflammation. That's a big one. What is causing the inflammation, right? What is actually setting the house on fire, right? And that's why the firemen are there. So if you want to get rid of the firemen, we gotta help them put out the fire. Or like whatever, turn the gas stove off or whatever's like keeping the fire going. We want to look at nutrient deficiencies, increase HDL. It can be done through omega-3, magnesium, vitamin D. Those are all important. Support insulin sensitivity, make sure that your insulin signaling is optimized, and treat the gut. Look at dysbiosis, look at fatty liver, make sure the liver's functioning optimally. And some of the things you might get these are some evidence-based theories. A treatment plan never looks like this. It's never just like slap, slap, slap. It's like very specific. I don't just tell you to go exercise, like we talk about it. And
yeah, and just
I was just going to say, and then you don't do it, but
and just
yeah,
in terms of the exercise, quite a few of the Reshape Method members have said that, they've come back from their doctor and their doctor's like, well, what are you doing? Your cholesterol's come down. So
yeah. It's massively powerful, and your doctor will accept that works. So it is like, it's solid in the research that exercise helps. It lowers LDL and it raises HDL. So it does whatever, it keeps your doc happy.
Any exercise or specific kinds at this point?
Any exercise. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Most of the research is on aerobic exercise. It's the easiest to study. So you're always going to see research on like 30 minutes of walking a day.
Yes.
And that's great. Right. Do it. And there's more research now on strength training, which I think everyone should do at least a couple times a week, some weight bearing exercise. So either your body weight, like Tracy's program gets the process started. You start with your body weight, you start to add a load. The nice thing about strength training, I gave this spiel to a patient yesterday. I was trying to sell her. I was like, it never takes more time. Like 20 minutes is good. And what you do is when that gets too easy, you just add more weight.
Right.
Yeah. So so like if your 1 hour run is easy, you got to keep running more. Right. But if your weightlifting exercise is easy, you just add more weight. So you're always loading and you're always increasing, and it has a massive benefit to mood and builds muscle. That's probably the most powerful thing you can do to get your insulin levels down. But the magic drug, the best medicine on earth for managing your insulin and your glucose levels is after every meal, go for move your muscles. Yeah. Go for it doesn't have to be a long walk. You don't need to go for an hour. Literally 5 minutes of moving your muscles after you eat will lower your glucose by 30%. Like not even an insulin injection will do that. Yeah.
Say that again. Shout that from the mountaintops.
So 5 minutes of walking, whatever, getting up to load your dishwasher, just do it in like a very flamboyant way. That will lower your glucose by 30%.
Yeah. And that's the magic, because I'm showing people how to get a lot more natural movement and walking into their day in the Reshape Method, because we tend to overlook the simple things.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's very simple and it's massive. I've seen people with continuous glucose monitors. It's like, what did you do? Did your doctor put you on a new medication? No, I just did what you said, the walking thing. 5 minutes after meals. Eat breakfast, get up, do like a shimmy shake 5 minutes, go for a walk after lunch, go for a walk with your partner or your dog or whoever after dinner, and you're good to go. And so that's like massive. Has a huge impact. Probably more than like very like massive diet. Like diet changes are important, but you probably get further with the walking thing. And
why? What's the reason for that?
So your what insulin's job is doing, what its job is to get glucose into your cells. Okay, so your, like, I don't know, liver needs insulin to get glucose in. So any of the cells in your body, your glucose level goes up. The cells need insulin to get glucose in so that they can use the glucose for energy. And your body also wants your glucose levels down. It doesn't want high glucose. That's toxic to your body. That's why diabetes is a problem, because now your glucose levels have gone up. Your body can't control it, and it's increasing blood viscosity, and that's increasing your risk of all kinds of different health conditions. High insulin's also a bad thing. It also increases inflammation. It causes basically you're never in a fasted state. Your body's always acting as if it just got fed. So it's always telling your body to store fat. So your muscles, though, don't need insulin to soak glucose. So when you eat a meal, your glucose levels are going to go up. But if you move your muscles, it's like a sponge that sucks the glucose up, clears it out of your system without needing the subsequent insulin release. Mm-hmm. So you get this 30% reduction in your fasting glucose, and you're not getting this big insulin spike. And so over time, like what we're trying to do with insulin resistance is we're trying to reduce the load or the need for insulin. We're trying to get your insulin to stop needing to spike to manage your glucose. So your insulin is managing your glucose currently. If you don't have diabetes, like if your blood sugar is normal, but you have insulin resistance, your blood sugar, it's being compensated for with insulin. So you've got high insulin managing your blood sugar. And so what we want is to, like, okay, insulin, you take a day off. We don't need you anymore. So the more you can prevent your sugar from spiking, less insulin you need, the more you can blunt glucose, the glucose curve. So moving your muscles, there's certain ways you can eat. So eating a plate of vegetables before meals, eating your protein, your veggies first, then your protein and fat, then your carbs after. Carb reduction. No one wants to hear that. Reducing, that's a fast way to do it, is you do like a lower carb diet, taking out sugar. So like you're blunting your the glucose spikes, you're not requiring insulin release, and then over time your body starts to become more sensitive to insulin again. Yeah. So one of the fast ways you can do is just move your body, and then you can eat, you eat your pie, and you're like, okay, now I just gotta dance it out or go for a walk. Yeah. Within 15 minutes of your meal. So
I started doing that now. We have a treadmill in the basement because it's pretty icy outside and dark and like way too cold. After dinner, I just go down to the basement and I walk on my treadmill for 15 minutes.
Yeah, like just like that. Just move your move your muscles. And actually the soleus, which Tracy, you know all about the soleus, is one of the best muscles for soaking up glucose, interestingly enough. So if you do your calf exercises on Tracy's program, you do your like calf raises. Yeah. 5 minutes of those, you'll have like strong calves. Your apple pie is absorbed, 30% of it's absorbed. You're good to go.
Fantastic.
And there might be something. So, and the bigger your muscle, the more metabolically active your muscles, the better they are at doing this, right? So if your muscles are like, if you don't have access to your soleus, if you don't know how to like, if your calves aren't strong, you won't get as much of an effect. So the more you build muscle, the more you move your muscles. Right.
And that's why the whole idea of my approach is progressive, right? We start by just improving the alignment, and then you start adding load, right? Yeah. Which is what you were saying. You can always just stay at 20 minutes, but you just increase the weights.
That's right.
I just turned 53 and I've got this little collection of dumbbells that I'm getting. If every birthday I'm asking for a heavier dumbbell. So I started off at 30 and then 40. And this year I asked for 50. And I just do a couple of deadlifts, like 10 deadlifts with the dumbbells, like a couple of times a day. And the difference in whole body muscle strength is phenomenal.
And glute, and then you get like the like squat bum, the like nice bum.
Squat bum.
Yeah, it's the thing. It's 10. So you get a 50 pounds, if that's your weight, 50 pounds. So whatever, like, 10 to 12 reps, and you feel like tired by the end, so you feel like, okay, I probably can't do 15. Like I'm good at 12. I'm kind of maxed out. You take a break, you're ready to go again. You do it like 3 times, 3 sets, and that you're good. That's it. So maybe you do like 3 different exercises, like deadlifts, squats, lunges for the lower body. I don't know, shoulder press, bicep curls, tricep overhead things for the upper body. You do some like you can alternate it. So like one day is one day is the next, or you do a full body twice a week. Like it's a lot less than what people think, right? People are like, I go to the gym for an hour. It's like,
and I think people are also, there are, for some reason, I know I was certainly like this before I started doing this work, we're afraid to increase the load. I know if we think we're going to bulk up, but what I'm really encouraging people to do is like, especially women, like you've got to move on from the pink dumbbells. They are not serving you,
pink ones,
right? And they're definitely not serving your cholesterol either.
Yeah, no. Yeah. Start lifting heavier weights. And this will, I have like a whole email I sent people about how maybe, insulin resistance, and there's a lot of theories on this. Insulin resistance may be caused by a lack of muscle. Our body's not able to compensate, manage glucose anymore because it just doesn't have enough of a muscle sponge. And that's the first place insulin resistance tends to occur, is in the muscle. So low protein diets, high stress, not, too much cardio, which is breaking down your muscle. Stress again breaks down your muscle. So all these things, all these patterns, and the thing, it's not one thing usually, it's a pattern over time. And then so all we have to do is like understand what are those specific patterns and reshift. This is why, here's a rant, everyone. This is why I'm like, okay, we hear diet exercise. We're like, okay, that means like treadmill, and which I'm not talking about your treadmill thing. I'm talking about like the 45 minutes on the elliptical. So like steady state cardio and low calorie diet. I'm going to track my calories but that is not the target. Like that's not the answer, right? So that's not the problem wasn't the calories, and the problem wasn't the lack of like just steady state cardio, right? It wasn't calories that was the issue. It was the lack of muscle, the lack of protein, the stress. So the low calorie diet it's like not an incomplete solution. We haven't gotten the right solution. We're imposing now some kind of stressful limitation and a way that we're looking at our food now. And it's not the targeted specific approach, which is forget about calories, raise your protein first of all and see what happens. Start building muscle, start moving every day. Okay, let's see what happens. Start managing your stress. So it's like, this is the more targeted. So this is what I mean by it's not like it's easy, but it's not the like, oh my God. And a lot of the time we're burnt out by the idea of diet and exercise because we tried that approach, didn't really work, wasn't sustainable, and it was very stressful, and it worsened some of the components of the pattern that were at play. So this is a problem, right? So people are like, I'm on a low calorie diet. I'm like, okay, but that's just taking the imbalance ratio of macronutrient, and you're just now decreasing the amount, right? So you're decreasing your carbs, but you're still mostly eating carbs. And so for your body, that's just stress. It's like your body just doesn't, your body's not like, woohoo, we're getting healthy. It's like, we're stressed, we're dying, we're starving. And now we're having to run. And then we add
the stress of the stressful exercise on top of it, right? And I love what Dr. Lyon says. She's the muscle-centric doctor, right? She's like, you're not overweight, you're under muscled.
Yeah. You're under muscled. And there's another rant, or another aside, I guess, is that when you have high insulin and when you weigh more, so 2 things that you don't want, you're actually in a very good place to reverse the pattern. Like there's almost an advantage there, because when you have a lot of circulating insulin puts muscle on your body. So when you do a weightlifting exercise, if you have fast, like baseline high fasting insulin, you're going to put on muscle so much faster than your skinny friend who's like doing beach body every day. Like, I know this because my friend who's like always like 110 pounds, she's like, yeah, I'm doing this workout. I'm putting on they're telling me a pound of muscle a month is a good target. Right. So that's kind of wild. Whereas I can put on a lot faster than that. And I was doing this yoga, like a 50-minute yoga. I was dying at the end. And the yoga teacher is probably like 80 pounds soaking wet. She's like super easy for her. And I'm like, but it's hard for me because it's like, I'm doing this with like your new birthday kettlebell, you know? So it's like, I'm holding the kettlebell doing. So you're actually in a better, like you're going to build muscle. It's a more effective workout. So I'll just quickly, after bring my dog to the vet in a minute. So fish oil, we talked about this. It reduces triglycerides. The main thing it does, it lowers blood viscosity, lowers inflammation, good for the brain. You want high dose fish oil. Most people don't dose high enough. So 2 to 4 grams a day total omega-3s, and then about 1 gram of EPA a day. Phosphatidylcholine, I'll recommend quite a bit for increasing choline, helps shift the cholesterol ratio. It helps with brain health. It helps reduce fatty liver, or it prevents fatty liver, certainly. Supports gallbladder function, and it supports gut health. It helps with concentration because it makes acetylcholine. And it's also helping to move cholesterol into bile acid synthesis. And interestingly, so there's something called the number needed to treat, NNT. It's like, how many people do you need to treat to get one person who, like, to prevent one heart attack? Okay, so so everyone thinks like, if you take this drug, everyone's going to have no, it's, you look at the NNT. So if you give 217 people a statin, you prevent 1 heart attack. Okay, but 210 people, okay, so, but if you give 61 people the Mediterranean diet, you prevent a heart attack. So let that sink in. I know, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so Mediterranean diet is high olive oil, fruits, vegetables, protein, whole grains, like the healthy diet, right? Right. Good fats, avocado, and right. So NNT, number needed to treat 61 people to prevent a heart attack if you put them all in the Mediterranean diet. But if you put 270 people on statins, only you'll prevent 1 heart attack. But the number needed to harm, so there's none for the Mediterranean diet, because the only harm is like, well, I don't know, it's not that restrictive. Like, you still get wine, but the number needed to harm for statins are 210. So 210 people get a statin, and then 1 person will get diabetes. Right. Right. So of those 210 people, if you give 210 people a statin, you'll prevent 1 heart attack and 1 person will get diabetes. Mm-hmm. And if you give 21 people a statin, 1 person will have muscle damage. Mm-hmm. All right. So those 217 people, you're getting, 10 cases of muscle damage. All right. That's all I need to say.
Wow.
Talia. That's it.
Thank you so much for this information, because it really, it's empowerment, right? And I love, that everybody can go through this over and over again and look at, like, Dr. Talia has given us so much detail that you can look through your reports, your tests, and get a better understanding of what's going on. So as Dr. Talia said, you can go to your doctor and start to ask the questions, mm-hmm. right? And be a little bit more empowered, and know that there are options if you're prepared, mm-hmm. to not just, that the statin is not the panacea, right? There is no thing as a magic bullet, right? There's no magic wand. If you are prepared to do the work, to take charge of your health and charge of your change, do the right kind of exercise, eat the right kind of food. And it's not very hard. It really isn't as complex as people make it out to be, right? And if you've done the diet, you've done the exercise, and it hasn't worked for you, then come and speak to me. I'll tell you about the Reshape method, because what we do is, like, not diet and not exercise like anything, it. Mm-hmm. So thank you so much for coming to talk to us. It's been incredible. If you have any questions, please just pop them in the comments, and Dr. Talia will come into the Moving and Reshaping for Women Over 40 Facebook group and answer them for us, I'm sure. Thank you. Just such important information.
Thank you, Tracy. This is great. Thanks, everyone.
Amazing. See you next time. Bye.